G'day, Dave here. I'm back with you for a dose of Ecclesiastes. It's always a good thing to have a healthy dose of Ecclesiastes each day. And we're looking at chapter 4 from verse 13. It's a trickier passage today. It's a little hard to follow all of its argument, but I think the basic message is pretty clear, and it has to do with the fleeting nature of popularity and how quickly people who are followed as leaders, people are given power and prestige and positions of authority, how quickly we can lose interest in them and move on to the next person. So read with me. Better a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king who no longer knows how to heed a warning. The youth may have come from prison to the kingship, or he may have been born in poverty within his kingdom. I saw that all who lived and walked under the sun followed the youth, the king's successor. There was no end to all the people who were before them, but those who came later were not pleased with the successor. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. There's a contrast here between a wise youth, a young man who's got understanding, who's respected, and a king who's past his use by date. He's become senile. He's not listening to other people. He's got his authority, he's got his position, he doesn't really care about others. But as you go on through this little passage, you see that the popularity even of the next one can wane. And so the people weren't pleased any longer with the successor. Now, this is true, isn't it? It's true of life, it's true of leadership, it's true of politics, it's true within the church. We've certainly seen many examples of people who rise to power on a popular vote. Everyone's pleased. There's great enthusiasm about the new leader, but it doesn't take long to be disenchanted. It doesn't take long for us to see their weaknesses, their false promises, to see that these are people who are flawed just like those who came before them. And so popularity ratings fall, and then there's a coup and somebody else steps in. And certainly for us here in Australia, I think it's many years now since we've actually seen a Prime Minister fulfill a whole term in office. People decide that because his ratings have dropped, they need a better leader because it's really all about winning the next election. Well, what do we make of this? Well, I think there's some lessons that we can learn, because there's a great temptation to think that if only we get more influence, if only we get a bigger following, if only we get fame, then we will have arrived. And there's no more temptation to this than in the social media market, is there? How often do we check our Facebook to see how many people liked a post, to see how many friends we might have, to see how many followers there are, to see how many comments there are on a particular photograph or something that we've put up on our profile. And with Instagram, we're checking how many loves and likes we've got. We want to see how many followers we have and how that compares to how many followers others have. I had a friend who was pretty impressed with the fact that he had about 40 followers. He thought that was a pretty big deal. But then someone followed him who had 50,000. And I know that others would look at 50,000 and think, pittance. People have millions and millions of followers. But friends, the reality of having Facebook and Instagram followers is really pretty hollow. Many people that wouldn't know us, many people who we will never know. Is that really what life is about? You see, the nature of humanity is to seek the approval of others. In our own frail, selfish, insignificant lives, we like to be appreciated. We like people to look up to us. We like to have an influence. We like people to follow. And the temptation is to make life really all about us, about what we get, about what people can do for me. Jesus, on one occasion, was asked by two of his disciples whether they could have a special place in his kingdom. We can pick it up in Mark chapter 10. And these followers of Jesus, their names were James and John, The sons of Zebedee in Mark 10:35 came to Jesus and said, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask." "What do you want me to do for you?" he asked. They replied, "Let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory." See, they want the position. They want the authority. They want the glory. They want to rule. They want a following. And Jesus says to them, "You don't know what you're asking. Can you drink the cup that I drink or be baptized with the baptism that I'm baptized with?" "We can," they say. But Jesus said, "You will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism that I'm baptized with." Of course, he's speaking here about his death and the fact that they will die as they follow him. But to sit at my right or my left, he says, is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. Now, when the 10, that is the rest of the disciples, heard about this, they became indignant with James and John, maybe because they'd got the jump on them. And Jesus called them together and said, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them." And Jesus said, "Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man," speaking of himself, "didn't come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Friends, true greatness, true leadership expresses itself in humility. Jesus, who is in very nature God, it tells us in Philippians 2, didn't consider equality with God something to be clung on to. Instead, he humbled himself and became a man who would go to his death upon a cross to pay the price for our forgiveness. That is humility. That is servanthood. That is sacrificial leadership. That is what Jesus calls us to. Will we put our trust in the servant king? And will we follow him in the service of others?